filmmakers, cinephiles, scholars, and students. Conceived as a confluence or for intersubjective exchanges, moving image exhibits a pedagogic space for building discourse and a visual space that combines the use of audiovisual archives, found footage, reappropriated materials to produce an expanded cinema experience. The festival has been an experiment in merging multiple and diverse perspectives into an embodied adventure. In 2024, with several international collaborations with bodies and individuals from Canada, Switzerland, Germany, along with important Indian stakeholders, we look to broaden the festival and expand its horizons through exciting programs and collaborations. The 5-day festival, which will start on the 6th of November and continue till 10th of November, will have several curated sessions, master classes, panel discussions, alongside the screening of contemporary Indian as well as international experimental cinema in both invited, curated, and competitive sections. As last 2 years, we will also have 2 awards for the competitive section. We are a small festival, growing in stature, committed to bringing the most critical and emerging practices, as this is a really relatively new field and a niche area. And the festival is also conceptualized to create a space of exposure for a field that is very nascent. And like any young festival, we rely on word-of-mouth publicity and help from all our friends, such as you all who have visited us today. And one such friend is Ashish Avikuntak, who has guided me right from the beginning of the germination stage of the idea for having such a festival. He was extremely encouraging, proactive, and has helped shape this festival over the last 2 editions. And it is fitting that we start or flag off this year's festival satellite event with his film Nirakar Chhaya. Thank you, Ashish, for being here with us and for sharing this wonderful film that we are all looking forward to enjoying. Ashish, would you like to say a few words before we start? Ashish Avikuntak, everybody.
Hi. Thank you, Ushmita, for having me and asking me to show one of my films. So I and Ushmita were sitting and we were talking about what film to show. And I said it might be a good idea to show my first feature film. Why? Is something that I thought later on. And it's like this is exactly 20 years ago I shot this film. We started shooting in the month of September and October in 2004. I did not have enough money, so it took another 3 years for it to finish. We finished the film in 2007. But we shot majority of the film in 2004, September, October. This film is based on a very short novel by acclaimed Malayali contemporary writer, Sethumadhavan. The name of the novel is Pandavapuram. I had chanced upon the English translation of Pandavapuram probably around 1990s, mid-90s when I was in college. I had a chance to read it in a bus, in just like a 5-hour bus journey from Bombay to Nasik, and I was completely mesmerized by this work. And eventually, about 10 years later, I decided we should make a film. I got in touch with Sethumadhavan, and he was very, very kind enough to give me the permission without asking any money, which is quite extraordinary. This film is my first feature film. By the time I made this film, I had already shot a series of short films. This was shot on 35mm. 35mm is extraordinarily expensive. It was extraordinarily expensive then. It is extraordinarily expensive now. And during those years, this is 2004, so I spent almost all my scholarship or stipend that I was getting when I was a doctoral student at Stanford University to make this film. A majority, almost everything went in the making of this film. So this was not an easy film to make, and I'll be very happy to take questions after the screening. Also, just want to tell you that in the audience, the two main actors of the film, 𝗵𝘂𝗵𝗶𝘀𝗵𝗶 and Mondira, they both are here. And so I'm really happy that they could come for the screening. And I'm really happy to show this film. And when I say I'm happy in the sense that this film, I had gone to the censor certificate to get the censor certificate certification, but it was, they asked me to cut a couple of scenes, and only then they were willing to give me the certificate. I refused to do that, so this film never was released or was shown. It was only shown in a couple of festivals. So this might be the third, or the second or the third public screening or semi-public screening of this film in the last 20 years. So thank you everybody for coming. It's an 82-minute film, and after the screening, I'll be very happy to take questions. Thank you. Before we start the Q&A, I want to introduce you to the two young actors who have aged, and have aged gracefully. 𝗵𝘂𝗵𝗶𝘀𝗵𝗶 Haldar and Mondira Bandyopadhyay. I mean, it's just extraordinary the way they worked, and I think it was their bad luck, not so much mine, I think, that we could not get the film released. Because I think if the film was released when it was finished, it would have at least taken their career in a very different direction. That's what I would think. But any questions for any one of us or for me about the film, very happy to answer.
I loved it. I just want to know for all of you, especially for how terrifying is it. I'm not aware with the process of when a script is given to an actor or an actress and they actually live it. I mean, in this process, how did you go about it?
I think, as I said earlier, so I had read this book, the Malayalam book, which was translated in English when I was just soon after college. I think this was me 95, 96. I had taken a bus from Bombay to Nasik. And 4-hour bus ride, I finished the whole book. I was completely mesmerized. And then at that time I thought, okay, this would be an interesting film to make. But the actual book had a lot of characters. There's the family, and it's kind of like it's a family, had a lot of, about 15 auxiliary characters and stuff like that. When I started writing the film, I did not want those characters, so they were completely removed. And the film then revolves around these 3 characters. And a lot of things were written for the film. The monologues, the 3-4 monologues you see, the 2 monologues, that's not part of the actual story, the actual novel. They were written. How did I go about? So the way we shot fairly on a basis of what was kind of a unwritten script in that sense. Some scenes, some dialogues, and we started shooting. But the narrative that you see, this narrative, was basically done on the edit table. I worked with 2 editors, who you see. Then I also worked on the film. There were 8 different timelines, 8 different versions of this film, so as to say. And then I decided that, so finally after, it took me about a year and a half to get the timeline that I liked. And that's what you see. And then after the timeline was done, then we did the music. The music is a very important element in the film. It wasn't done. So Nurit, the person, was a graduate student at Stanford. So after the edit was done, I decided to go. Stanford has a very important, very big music school, music department. It has a whole school of music. And I went to their library, and because I was a student, I could check in students' work. So I started, and that was CD, so I would pull out the CD, listen, and I must have listened to about some 30, 40 students' CD who was still there, and I liked Gnuritz's work. I emailed her. I said, I've done this. Can I use your film, use your music? She said, sure, go ahead. And that's how it happened. And then, so got that CD. So the music was not done for the film. She already had a series of numbers, and I started placing them in the right place that I thought resonated with the film. So that's one way of telling you how the film was made.
So I found the aspect of music was kind of, I think, taking us right from the beginning through the story about what the outcome is going to be. But I thought it was actually done after the film was shot. Wow, thanks.
Look, so she was at that time doing a doctoral program as a composer. So as a composer student, you're supposed to write your own music and get it performed by different orchestras. I could never afford to get somebody and perform. That's too expensive. So the music was already there. So I said, can I use it? And because what I did with early other CDs is that I'll pull out the CDs, try putting them and see if it works or not. And I found that her works really brilliantly. And she was very kind. She said, yes. And I didn't have money. So she said, no worries. And she was very kind enough to give it to me. And I think I'm now very attached to the music more than the film, but that's a different story.
I mean, it's not a question per se, more, maybe it might turn into a ramble. But what he asked, I had a similar point of starting, that when you read a magic realist book, how does it, I mean, it reacts for everybody in a different way. But how do you take that and then go on a journey? Because in the beginning, when one watches the film for the first time, perhaps, it's always a question in your mind that where does reality end? Where does this kind of a dream, unreal space begin? And then you have certain sequences which are almost like a collage, like where the dab is being cut, constantly, or the killing of the chicken. So I mean, what do these kind of sequences, how do you conceive it, and what do they add apart from the fact that they become almost a liminal space between real and the unreal? I mean, I just want to pick your brains.
Yeah, very happy. Yeah. So, these specific scenes, and you don't see, I mean, you see them in also my later films. I still use these kind of scenes. They are meta-narrative punctuations. When I mean by meta-narrative, one great example of meta-narrative we see in popular cinema songs, song sequences, where which have meta-narrative elements, right? Love, sadness, somebody growing up in the whole song, and so on and so forth. So for me, these moments in the film, the cutting is, especially, and you see a lot of cutting in the film, it's just the dab and the banana and then the cucumber and then the chicken. It works as a leitmotif in the film, in the sense that it is supposed to produce an affect of a meta-narrative. Now, what does that mean? That will only depend on how you read it, rather than me telling you. But it has it's a meta-narrative punctuations. How do I come about with it? At least for this film, I had a list of things I wanted to shoot. So the film in my head was divided into dialogues, non-dialogues, and completely outside of these. And then we just started shooting everything. And then we sat on the edit table over the course of 1.5 years, different permutation and combination. And that's how it came.
20 years hence, how do you look back at it? Do you have changed anything?
No, I'm completely a fatalist in that sense. Nothing in my life or any of my films, not even a frame, I would change. They are what they are. They were made at the point they were made. No, nothing. This is a brilliant film for me. It's pretty perfect when I look at it now. I mean, the work we put in, the camera work. This was like a very difficult film in the sense, as I explained, it was expensive. For example, the color negative was not processed here. I was just telling a friend, the color negative that you see in the film, I took all the way to Bangkok because I wanted a very specific effect with the color negative, which is probably not perceptible because this is something called bleach bypass. So none of the bleach bypass is a process where the negative's contrast ratio increases, which none of the labs in Bombay did it or were willing to do it. So I actually went to a lab in Bangkok, which was quite well known because for those of you familiar with 𝗃𝗃𝗊 would go to that lab to process this film. So I was able to get connection, and then I went to Bangkok. Now, taking unexposed film from Calcutta airport to Bangkok airport without getting an X-ray was a complex procedure, let's put it this way. So that's one example. The other thing, the black and white, for example, the black and white negatives were not available in India then. I had to find a person who actually smuggled Orwo negative from Germany for this film, and we processed it in the only black and white lab in India, which was the FTI lab. So there was a lot of these kind of things that went in the making of the film. And yeah, this is quite good for me. Even if I look at 20 years later, I was just telling Deepak, we were talking, I said, yeah, it's aged quite well if I look at it. I wish, the print that I've shown you is actually an old digital print. I don't have the money to make a 4K scan, which is what I want to do now. The negatives are kept hopefully well in a cold storage in Bombay, but if I'm able to amass 3 to 5 lakhs, then I will probably scan the whole negative and make a pristine DCP print. There are only 2 prints of this film. I only had money to make 2 prints, only 1 subtitle print, which is in the archive in the US, and there's 1 unsubtitled film, which is probably lost in the archive in SRFTI.
One was almost, I couldn't do it myself, but you acknowledged Murakami in the end, okay. Which part?
So the last part in the cemetery.
Oh, okay.
The last part in the cemetery is from his novel, what's it called?
Norwegian Wood.
Norwegian Wood. The first, so if you've read Norwegian Wood, it's the last I think it's the first section when he's coming to meet the lover. And so just use that section. I had read Murakami just in the making of the film. I was just like mesmerized, and I decided to use it.
I was also curious because on this, they made a kind of narrative movie in Malayalam, okay?
Yes.
So did you ever end up watching it later or before?
I haven't. I was just speaking to Sayanth. I was wondering if there's a YouTube version. I don't know. I haven't watched it. So when in 2004, when I started making the film, Sethumadhavan said, Ashish, why do you want to make this film? This has been made into a film. I said, I don't care. I just want to do what I want to do. And he said, yes, go ahead. I'll be very happy. That time, there was no YouTube and any of these things, so I could not see the film. Not that I ever wanted to. And the past 20 years, I have not. Interesting. I think I want to watch it now.
And did Sethu ever watch it?
Yes. Sethu was very, very, very supportive. He was so supportive that he actually came all the way to Calcutta I think from Chennai then, to see the shooting of the film. And I've been in touch with Sethu through and through. In Kerala, I think people have watched this film in Kerala more than here. It has been shown a couple of times in Kerala. There is a Malayalam, about 2019, I think, a Malayalam screenplay of the film was published in Kerala. So it's I think people in Kerala know about it.
What was Sethu's reaction, if you remember?
He was, when he saw the film, I think he was disappointed. This is my feeling. But in the sense, I think he wanted a much more epic kind of film. This is what I think. But what he told me, he said he likes this film more than the Malayalam version. And he knew the gharana I was coming from, Mani and Kumar and that kind. He said, look, he was very close to Arvindan. He said, when I saw the film, I thought of Harrington, and I thought this is good. And I did not push him more to give more compliments.
So I'll tell you a lie if I tell you that I understood the movie fully, if I have time, I will have to go back and see it again. But these change of, the colors, basically, okay. Is it like she was giving a clue? Is it dream versus, because everything is unreal there, okay.
This is up to you to decide.
Okay.
Look, cinema is, especially this kind of cinema, this is a film, or the kind of films I usually make, it's taxing for the audience. You will have to work as an audience to make meanings. And the meaning I have made is not important, because whatever meaning I have made or I would have liked to make, you're seeing it here. Yeah, it could be dreams, it could be real. I'll leave that to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
very much.
I have a question actually.
Yes,
Let
go
me
ahead.
ask. Yeah, so in most of your films, and especially this, the setting and the space that you have chosen, I mean the architecture and the building, and the way it is, so does it affect, was it pre-decided? I want to get to know that, was it pre-decided that you'll find a set like this, or was it a building that you, sort of identified and then thought about the, how the cinema would progress? So I would want to know about that.
Look, when you don't have money, you can't decide locations. The way I usually make films is I shoot films in the location I have access to. So this film was partly shot in my house, friend's house, and in the streets of Calcutta. Things that I had access to, because you could say that I have an affinity towards degraded architectural world, because I find them more timeless in that sense. This could be because I'm an archaeologist also by training. But generally in this film, I shot in places I had access. So for example, what could be the house of the woman was a flat of a friend of mine. A lot of the film was shot in Hindustan Park, Southern Avenue area where I have grown up. The only thing we had to pay a lot of money was to shoot in tram. Shooting in tram is ridiculously expensive. I wanted to shoot in tram recently. They said for one day it's about 40,000 rupees. I said, this is a bit too much. And then the shooting on the launch was also expensive. So a few of those things put together. We shot the cemetery was also not so difficult. We got permission to shoot. I shot this film in a total of 16 days, but in 2 schedules. Majority of it was shot September, October of 2004, and then one section was shot about 3 months later. The Park Street Cemetery section was shot a little later, but majority of it was shot so total of 16 days of shooting, which on 35 millimeter with renting and camera, sound, and everything else was more expensive than I had bargained for.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to hear out that loud that the finance issues while making experimental films and how you
Look,
sort of negotiate all of that.
I don't think this is an experimental film. We can talk about that. I don't think of myself as an experimental filmmaker. I think of myself within the framework of 𝗔𝘀𝗵𝗶𝘀𝗵, but that's a different idea. But yes, to make any film, right? I think what I have done over the course of 30 years, next year will mark 30 years of filmmaking, is that what I have worked is that I have figured out an alternative means of finance. And the films I make, I do not expect them to make money for me. So for me, I don't have an expectation. For me, filmmaking is a sadhana. It's the way I live my life. I'm not expecting anything. And I figured out, thankfully, through various systems in my life, that I have certain surplus. Often, all of us live in a capitalist society. We are bound to produce surplus. Most people who produce surplus, like people who coming from middle class families and middle class lives, use that surplus to buy flats, houses, stocks, and so forth. I decided to make films, which is what I still do. And that's what I do.
Thank you.
It it felt very experimental. The novel felt like, very experimental, and it was magical realism and all those elements. So when I was reading that, I had a different sense of geographical space. It was not something which I thought a premise of the protagonist. It's something far away from their house or where they are living. So in your film, like, they are living in a space and they are going out. These are all known spaces. It's not unknown spaces. So how much of this, understanding of the space, like, how did you, like, figure out that, like, you want to see the known spaces or unknown spaces?
I think, 𝘕𝘪 is the only person who's read the novel in Malayalam, so that's why his comment is quite important. If you read the novel, it's based in a village in, I think, North Kerala.
Yeah.
And the village is like a typical Kerala village in the middle of a lot of greenery. There's a railway line, and that's where she goes to look for her lover, her paramour, as the English translation it every day. So it's a very different kind of a space. But when I was thinking of the film, when I first read the book, for instance, I was thinking of Ganga Ghat. That was in my head. But then shooting in a Ganga Ghat in Calcutta is a messy, to look for location and so on and so forth. So as I said earlier, when I started to decide to make the film, I needed to understand, and this is something very important for us who are independent filmmakers. This is what I teach with my students, is that first understand your limitations. Often filmmaking is about dreaming and imagining big things, but that's only possible if you work in commercial world. But even that's a different kind of dreaming. But if you're working as an independent filmmaker, before you even want to write a script, which is what I teach my student, and this is something I tell them, if you want to show a car crash sequence in your film, see to it that you have a car to crash. And I think that's very important. That if you want to make your own film in this independent way, know the limitation. What do you have access to? What kind of spaces you have access to? What kind of people you have access to? Like often students say, oh, there's a party sequence. I said, how many friends you have who you can give free beer and alcohol to have a party sequence? Usually, it's difficult to mount a party sequence if you don't have money, for instance. So when I was thinking of something, I figured out what access you have, what access I had. I had few friends who were willing to give their space. I had my own apartment, my parents' apartment, a neighborhood where I knew people, where I could shoot on the streets, a little bit of iconic locations of Calcutta where I was willing to put in some money to the tram, the train, the launch on the ghats. And that's how I kind of cobbled together a framework to shoot the film. And then a lot of what the affective framework of the film emerges while you're editing and then doing sound design. So as an audience, what you're going with is an experience which is constructed on the edit table and kind of fueled by the musical system, the musical sound design in the film. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it for all those who came. And thank you, Ushmita and 𝘕𝘪.